The bullet missed Kendra Garrison's head by less than an inch, and she knew in that moment her husband would kill her if she didn't run tonight. She pressed herself against the rough wooden wall of their homestead, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Through the window, she could see Thomas pacing inside, the whiskey bottle in one hand and his revolver in the other. He was muttering to himself, cursing her for failing him again, failing to give him the son he demanded, failing to be a proper wife, failing at everything, according to him. Kendra had married Thomas Whitfield 3 years ago in the spring of 1882, when she was just 19 years old and foolish enough to believe his charm was genuine. He had seemed kind during their brief courtship in St. Louis, always bringing her flowers and speaking sweetly. But the moment they arrived at his property outside Cheyenne, Wyoming, everything changed. The mask slipped away, revealing a man who saw her as nothing more than a means to an end, a vessel to carry his legacy, a workhorse to maintain his land. For 3 years, she had endured his cruelty as her body refused to quicken with child. Month after month, he grew more violent, more convinced that she was deliberately defying him. The local doctor had examined her last winter and delivered the devastating news in clinical terms she barely understood. Something about her womb being damaged, scarred from an illness she had suffered as a child. The doctor said she would never bear children. She was barren. When she told Thomas, he had flown into a rage so terrible she thought he would kill her right then. Instead, he began a campaign of slow torture, reminding her daily of her worthlessness, her failure as a woman. Tonight, the whiskey had made him bold enough to try to end what he saw as his mistake in marrying her. Kendra waited until she heard him collapse onto the bed, the bottle finally draining him of consciousness. She crept into the house with the silence of a ghost, gathered the small bundle she had been secretly preparing for weeks, and took the money she had hidden in a coffee tin buried behind the chicken coop. It was money she had saved from selling eggs in town, coins and small bills she had squirreled away for exactly this moment. She saddled Thomas's second horse, a gentle mare named Stella, and rode into the September night with nothing but the clothes on her back, her small bundle, and a desperate hope that she could disappear before dawn. The stars wheeled overhead as she pushed Stella hard toward the south, away from Cheyenne, toward territory she barely knew. She had heard talk in town of ranches deeper in Wyoming, places where people minded their own business and didn't ask too many questions. She just needed to get far enough away that Thomas couldn't find her, though she knew he would try. A man like Thomas didn't let go of his possessions easily, even the ones he claimed to despise. By the time the sun began to paint the eastern sky in shades of rose and gold, Kendra was exhausted and lost. The landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, rolling grasslands broken by distant mountains. She had no idea where she was going anymore. She only knew she had to keep moving. That was when Stella stepped into a prairie dog hole. The mare went down with a terrible scream, and Kendra was thrown clear, hitting the ground hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. She lay gasping for several minutes before she could stagger to her feet. Stella was trying to stand but immediately collapsed again. Her right foreleg was badly broken. Kendra felt tears burn her eyes as she approached the suffering animal. She had no gun, no way to end Stella's pain mercifully. The horse's dark eyes looked at her with an accusation she felt deep in her soul. Another failure. Another innocent creature suffering because of her. She unsaddled Stella with shaking hands, whispering apologies and promises she couldn't keep. She left the horse with access to a small stream that ran nearby, though she knew it was pointless. She gathered her bundle and began walking south, the sun climbing higher and hotter with each step. By midday, Kendra was stumbling. She had finished the water in her canteen hours ago. The September sun beat down mercilessly, and she had been foolish enough to run without proper supplies. She had been operating on panic and adrenaline, not logic. When she saw the dust cloud on the horizon, her first thought was that Thomas had found her. She considered simply lying down and accepting whatever came next. But as the rider drew closer, she realized it was not her husband. The man approaching rode with an easy confidence that Thomas had never possessed. He sat tall in the saddle, and even from a distance, she could see he was watching her carefully. Vincent Bradley had been checking fence lines on the southern edge of his property when he spotted the figure stumbling through the grassland. He knew immediately something was wrong. Nobody walked out here alone, especially not a woman in a calico dress with nothing but a small bundle. As he rode closer, he took in more details. She was young, probably mid-20s, with dark hair that had escaped from its pins and hung in tangles around her face. Her dress was covered in dust, torn at the hem. She was sunburned and swaying on her feet. When she looked up at him, he saw the fear flash across her face, saw her consider running despite the fact that she could barely stand. "Easy now," he said, keeping his voice low and calm, the same tone he used with spooked horses. "I'm not going to hurt you. Looks like you could use some help." Kendra tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. She swayed again, and suddenly the stranger was off his horse and catching her before she fell. His hands were gentle but strong, and when he held his canteen to her lips, she drank greedily. "Slow down," he said. "You'll make yourself sick." She forced herself to sip instead of gulp, and gradually the world stopped spinning quite so violently. When she could focus again, she found herself looking into concerned gray eyes set in a tanned, weathered face. He was probably 30 or so, with dark brown hair and the build of a man who made his living through physical labor. He wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy, nothing fancy but everything well maintained. "Thank you," she managed to whisper. "Can you tell me what happened? Are you hurt?" Kendra shook her head, then immediately regretted the motion as dizziness washed over her again. "My horse broke her leg. I've been walking since dawn." "Where were you headed?" She looked away, unable to meet his eyes. "Anywhere. Nowhere. Just away." Vincent studied her for a long moment, and she could see him putting pieces together. The fear in her eyes, the fresh bruise on her cheekbone that she had tried to hide with her hair, the fact that she was alone and undersupplied. He had seen enough of the world to recognize a woman running from something bad. "Well, you're on my land now, about 10 miles south of Cheyenne," he said. "My ranch is about 3 miles west of here. You're welcome to rest there, get cleaned up, have a proper meal. Then we can figure out what comes next." "I don't have money to pay you," Kendra said quickly. "I mean, I have a little, but I need it for supplies when I reach the next town." "I didn't ask for payment," Vincent said simply. He helped her onto his horse, then swung up behind her. "Let's get you out of this sun before you collapse." Kendra was too exhausted to argue. She sat stiffly in front of him, hyper-aware of his presence, but he kept his hands respectfully on the reins and said nothing more as they rode west. The Bradley ranch was not the impressive spread Kendra had been half expecting. It was modest but well-maintained, with a small house, a barn, a corral with several horses, and various outbuildings. Everything spoke of hard work and careful management rather than inherited wealth. Vincent helped her down from the horse and led her to the house. Inside, it was simply furnished but clean. He showed her to a small washroom and provided fresh water, soap, and a towel. "I'll be in the kitchen fixing some food," he said. "Take your time." Kendra washed her face and hands, wincing at the bruise on her cheek. She tried to tidy her hair, but it was hopeless without a proper brush. When she emerged, she found Vincent had laid out bread, cheese, cold beef, and fresh water. He gestured for her to sit, and she ate slowly, forcing herself not to devour everything despite her hunger. He sat across from her with his own plate but ate little, mostly just watching her with those calm gray eyes. "What's your name?" he asked finally. She hesitated, then decided there was no point in lying. "Kendra Garrison." "Well, Kendra Whitfield, technically, but I'm trying to stop being that. Running from a husband," she nodded, waiting for judgment, but Vincent's expression remained neutral. "He coming after you?" "Probably," she admitted, "when he sobers up enough to notice I'm gone." "What's his name?" "Thomas Whitfield. He has a homestead about 15 miles northeast of Cheyenne." Vincent nodded slowly. "I know the name, never met him personally, but I've heard talk. Drinks too much, runs through hired hands like water." "That's him," Kendra said bitterly. "You have family you can go to, friends?" She shook her head. "My parents died when I was 17. Thomas was charming when we courted. I thought I was lucky to find a husband who wanted me despite having no family, no dowry." She laughed, a harsh sound. "I was so stupid." "You weren't stupid. You were young and he was a liar. That's not the same thing." The kindness in his voice nearly undid her. Kendra felt tears threaten and blinked them back fiercely. She had cried too much over Thomas already. "I can't go back," she said. "I know you probably think I should try to work things out, that a wife's place is with her husband, but I can't. He'll kill me eventually. Last night he shot at me." "I don't think you should go back," Vincent said firmly. "A man who raises his hand to a woman is no man at all. You need a safe place to figure out your next move." "I was thinking of going further south, maybe Colorado, finding work in a town where nobody knows me." "What kind of work?" Kendra shrugged helplessly. "I can cook, clean, so I can read and write and do figures. I was hoping to find a position as a housekeeper or maybe in a shop." Vincent was quiet for a moment, seeming to consider something. "I have a proposition for you if you want to hear it." Kendra tensed, waiting for the inevitable demand. She knew how these things worked. Men didn't help women for free. As if reading her thoughts, Vincent held up his hands. "Nothing improper, I promise. Here's the situation. I run this ranch by myself, which means I'm doing the work of about 3 men most days. I can barely keep up with the stock and the land, which means the house and everything else falls by the wayside. I eat out of cans half the time, and I haven't had clean clothes that weren't stiff as a board in months. I need help, the kind of help a hired hand can't provide. I need someone to manage the house, cook proper meals, maybe help with the chickens and the garden. I can pay wages, not much, but fair. And you'd have a roof over your head and 3 meals a day. You want to hire me as a housekeeper and a cook, and whatever else needs doing around here that isn't ranch work." He met her eyes steadily. "You'd have your own room. I wouldn't bother you. You'd be an employee, nothing more. And if your husband comes looking, I'll send him on his way." It was too good to be true, which meant there had to be a catch. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" "Because I need the help and you need a safe place. Seems like it works out for both of us." He paused. "And because I don't like bullies, especially bullies who hurt women. My father used to knock my mother around when he was drinking. I was too young to stop him before he got himself killed in a bar fight. I swore I'd never be that kind of man, and I'd help anyone trying to get away from that kind of man." Kendra studied his face, looking for deception, but found only sincerity. Maybe she was still being stupid, still being too trusting, but what choice did she have? She could take her small amount of money and try to make it to Colorado alone, or she could accept this offer and at least have some time to plan properly. "All right," she said. "I'll work for you, but if you try anything, I'll leave." "Fair enough," Vincent said. He extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she shook it. His palm was calloused and warm. Over the next few days, Kendra settled into a routine at the Bradley ranch. She discovered that Vincent had not exaggerated the state of his household. The kitchen was functional but bare of any supplies that took effort. The house was dusty and cluttered with things that had no proper place. His clothes were indeed stiff from being washed without soap and dried on bushes. She set about putting things right with a determination that surprised her. For 3 years, she had done her best to keep Thomas's house perfect, knowing that any small flaw would bring his wrath. But that had been fear-driven drudgery. This was different. Vincent noticed her efforts and thanked her sincerely. When she cooked a proper dinner that first night, he ate like a starving man and told her it was the best meal he'd had in 2 years. She found herself relaxing incrementally, though she still jumped at sudden noises and tensed whenever she heard a horse approach. But Vincent was always respectful, always careful to give her space. He worked long hours outside, coming in only for meals and sleep. He never raised his voice, never made demands. He asked if she wouldn't mind doing things, and he thanked her when they were done. It was so foreign to her that she didn't know how to respond at first. 1 week after her arrival, Vincent came in for lunch and found her in the kitchen, her face pale and her hands shaking. She had been kneading bread dough when she heard riders approaching. Through the window, she had seen 3 men on horseback riding up to the ranch. "It's all right," Vincent said immediately. "That's just my neighbors, the Patterson brothers. They come by sometimes to talk business. You want to stay in your room until they leave." Kendra nodded gratefully and retreated to the small bedroom off the kitchen that Vincent had given her. She sat on the bed, listening to the rumble of male voices in the front room, her heart racing. She knew it was probably not Thomas, but she couldn't shake the fear. After the men left, Vincent tapped gently on her door. "Kendra, they're gone, you can come out." She emerged, embarrassed by her reaction. "I'm sorry, I know I'm being foolish." "You're not being foolish, you're being careful, there's a difference." He hesitated. "Those men don't know anything about you, and I didn't tell them. As far as anyone needs to know, you're a widow I hired to help around the place. If anyone asks, your last name is Garrison and your husband died back east. That's all they need to know." "Thank you," Kendra said softly. "If Thomas comes around, I'll handle it. You don't have to face him. He won't give up easily. He's stubborn and he has a temper." "So do I when someone threatens what's mine," Vincent said, then quickly added, "I mean threaten someone under my protection. You're safe here, Kendra, I promise." She believed him, which was perhaps the most surprising thing of all. As summer faded into autumn, Kendra found herself settling into life at the ranch in ways she hadn't anticipated. She took pride in the improvements she made. She planted a fall garden with vegetables that would keep through the winter. She organized the root cellar and put up preserves from the wild berries she found growing along the creek. She mended Vincent's clothes and made curtains for the windows. She cooked hearty meals that put healthy weight back on Vincent's lean frame. And slowly, carefully, they became friends. Vincent was easy to talk to. He had a dry sense of humor that snuck up on her, and he was genuinely interested in her thoughts on things. They fell into the habit of having coffee together after dinner, sitting on the porch and watching the sun set over the distant mountains. He told her about his life, about growing up in Wyoming territory, about starting this ranch 5 years ago with money he'd saved from years of working cattle drives. He spoke of his dreams to build something lasting, something good. Kendra found herself sharing things she had never told anyone. Not about Thomas and the abuse, but about her childhood, her parents, her dreams of having a home filled with love and laughter. She told him about the books she'd read, the places she wanted to see. and Vincent listened with an attention that made her feel truly heard for the first time in years. One evening in late October, after they'd finished their coffee, Vincent said, "Can I ask you something personal? You can tell me to mind my own business if you want." Kendra tensed but nodded. "Why did Thomas get so angry with you?" "I know he drank and he had a temper, but it seemed like there was something specific that set him off." She had known this question would come eventually. She stared out at the darkening sky, gathering her courage. "I can't have children," she said finally. "The doctor said I'm barren. My womb is damaged from an illness I had when I was young. Thomas married me expecting sons, and when I couldn't give them to him, he turned mean. Every month that passed without my being pregnant, he got worse. He said I was worthless, that I'd tricked him, that I was a failure as a woman." She expected pity or awkwardness, but Vincent's voice was steady when he spoke. "You're not worthless and you're not a failure. Having children doesn't define your worth as a person. Most men wouldn't see it that way. Then most men are fools." He was quiet for a moment. "For what it's worth, I think you're one of the strongest people I've ever met. You survived 3 years of hell, you found the courage to run, and you've built a life here from nothing. That's not failure, that's bravery." Kendra felt tears prick her eyes. "I warned you because I thought you should know. In case you're expecting things to change between us, in case you're waiting for me to become something more than an employee. I can't give you children, Vincent. I can't give any man children." He turned to look at her, his gray eyes serious in the fading light. "Kendra, I'm not expecting anything from you except honest work, which you've more than provided. If things between us ever changed, if we ever became something more than employer and employee, it would be because we both wanted it, not because of some obligation or expectation. And if we did become more, then I'll love you for you alone. Children or no children, that wouldn't matter to me." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning that neither was quite ready to fully acknowledge. "Thank you," Kendra whispered. They didn't speak of it again, but something had shifted. The air between them felt charged with possibility, with the tentative recognition of feelings that were growing despite both of their attempts to keep things professional. Winter arrived with a vengeance in mid-November, bringing snow that blanketed the ranch in white silence. Kendra and Vincent worked together to prepare, moving the cattle to winter pasture, storing hay, insulating the house against the cold. They worked in comfortable synchronization, anticipating each other's needs without words. The forced proximity of winter brought them closer. On days when the snow fell too heavily for Vincent to work outside, he helped Kendra with indoor tasks, and they talked for hours. He taught her to play chess using a battered set he'd had since he was a boy. She taught him to make proper biscuits, laughing as he fumbled with the dough. There were moments when their hands would brush, and both would freeze, awareness crackling between them. Moments when Vincent would look at her across the dinner table, and she would see something in his eyes that made her heart race. Moments when she would catch herself thinking about what it would be like to be held by him, not in fear but in warmth, but neither acted on it. Kendra was still technically married, and Vincent was too honorable to push. So they danced around their growing feelings, both knowing and neither speaking. 3 days before Christmas, Thomas Whitfield finally came. Kendra was in the kitchen preparing dinner when she heard the shouting outside. She recognized that voice immediately, the drunken rage that had haunted her nightmares. She dropped the spoon she was holding, her whole body going rigid with terror. Vincent came through the door quickly. "Get in your room and lock the door," he said quietly. His face was calm, but his eyes were hard. "Don't come out until I tell you it's safe." "He'll hurt you," Kendra said, her voice shaking. "He'll try." Vincent checked his revolver, then met her eyes. Trust me, Kendra, I've dealt with drunks before. Lock the door." She retreated to her room and turned the key with trembling hands. Through the wall, she could hear Thomas bellowing. "I know she's here, Bradley. That's my wife and I want her back. You got no right to keep her, Mrs. Whitfield is under my protection and she's not going anywhere with you." Vincent's voice was level but firm. "She's my wife, my property. You send her out here right now or I'll come in there and get her. You're not coming in my house, Whitfield, and Kendra is not property. She's a human being who has the right to choose where she lives and who she lives with. She doesn't choose you. She doesn't get to choose. I'm her husband. The law says she belongs to me. The law also says I can defend my property and the people on it. You're trespassing. I'm asking you nicely to leave. Nicely. You think you're better than me, Bradley. You think you can just steal another man's wife and hide behind your gun. I didn't steal anyone. She ran from you because you beat her and threatened her life. That's not a wife, Whitfield. That's a prisoner, and you let her escape." Kendra heard the sound of Thomas trying to dismount, heard him stumble. He was very drunk, which made him even more dangerous. "I'm going to kill you," Thomas slurred. "Going to shoot you dead and take what's mine. Draw on me, and it'll be the last thing you do." Vincent's voice had gone cold. "I'm a better shot sober than you are on your best day, and you're drunk enough to fall off your own boots. Go home, Whitfield. Sleep it off. File for divorce if you want, but Kendra is never going back to you." "She told you about that, did she? About how she's useless? How she can't give a man children?" Thomas laughed, an ugly sound. "You're welcome to the Barren witch. She's good for nothing anyway." "She's worth 10 of you on your best day," Vincent said, and Kendra could hear the anger finally bleeding into his voice. "Now get off my land before I lose my patience." There was a long silence. Kendra held her breath, waiting for the gunshot, for the sound of violence. But finally, she heard Thomas curse and the sound of a horse being poorly mounted. "You can have her," Thomas shouted. "She's your problem now. Don't come crying to me when you realize what a mistake you made." The sound of hoofbeats faded into the distance. Kendra waited, her heart hammering, until she heard Vincent's gentle knock. "It's safe now. He's gone." She unlocked the door and emerged to find Vincent standing there, his expression softening as he saw her pale face. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Are you?" She looked him over frantically, checking for injuries. "I'm fine. He never even drew his gun, too drunk to be a real threat." Vincent guided her to a chair. "Sit down before you fall down." Kendra sat, her legs shaking too hard to hold her. "He knows where I am now. He'll come back, maybe. But I don't think so. He's a coward and a bully, and bullies back down when someone stands up to them. He wanted you to be afraid and alone so he could control you. Now you're not alone, and he knows it." Vincent knelt in front of her chair, taking her cold hands in his warm ones. "I meant what I said out there, Kendra. You're under my protection, and I won't let him hurt you again." "Why?" the word burst out of her. "Why do you care? Why are you doing all this for me?" Vincent looked at her for a long moment, his gray eyes searching her face. "Because I'm falling in love with you," he said simply. "I have been for a while now, I think. Maybe since the first day, when you looked at me with those frightened eyes but didn't break. Maybe during all those evenings on the porch, talking about everything and nothing. Maybe it was when you laughed for the first time, really laughed, and I realized I wanted to hear that sound every day for the rest of my life." Kendra stared at him, her heart suddenly pounding for an entirely different reason. "I know the timing is terrible," Vincent continued. "You're still married, still healing from everything Thomas put you through. I'm not asking for anything from you, Kendra. I just want you to know that you're safe here, not because you work for me, but because I care about you. Deeply. And whatever you need, whether that's time or space or just friendship, I'll give it to you, but I wanted you to know the truth." "I warned you," Kendra whispered. I told you I'm barren. Then I'll love you for you alone, Vincent said firmly. He squeezed her hands gently. I don't need children to be happy, Kendra. I need a partner. Someone to share my life with. Someone who makes me laugh and challenges me and cares about the things I care about. Someone who turns a house into a home. If that someone is you, then that's all I need. Everything else is just details. The tears Kendra had been holding back finally spilled over, but these weren't tears of fear or pain. These were tears of relief, of hope, of feeling truly seen and valued for the first time in her life. I think I'm falling in love with you too, she admitted. I've been trying not to because I was afraid. Afraid of making another mistake, afraid of being hurt again, afraid that you'd change like Thomas did. But you keep being kind. You keep being patient. You keep being exactly who you seem to be, and I don't know what to do with that. You don't have to do anything, Vincent said softly. We'll figure it out together, one day at a time. He stood and pulled her gently to her feet, then wrapped his arms around her in a careful embrace. Kendra tensed for just a moment before melting into his warmth. He held her while she cried out 3 years of fear and pain and loneliness. He stroked her hair and murmured reassurances and didn't let go until she was ready. When she finally pulled back, Vincent wiped the tears from her cheeks with his thumbs. Better, better, she agreed. Good. Because dinner's burning. Kendra gasped and ran back to the kitchen, where she found the roast was indeed smoking. They managed to save most of it, and Vincent declared it the best burned dinner he'd ever had. The tension of the day dissolved into laughter, and by the time they finished eating, Kendra felt lighter than she had in years. That night, she lay in her bed thinking about Vincent's words. He loved her. He knew she couldn't have children, and he didn't care. He wanted her anyway for herself alone. It seemed impossible, a dream too good to be true. But Vincent had proven himself over and over in the months she'd been here. He was steady and true and nothing like Thomas. Maybe, she thought, she was allowed to be happy. Maybe she was allowed to take this chance. Christmas came, and Vincent surprised her with gifts he'd clearly put thought into. A set of beautiful hair combs, a new shawl in soft blue wool, and a book of poetry she'd mentioned wanting to read. Kendra gave him new work gloves she'd sewn herself and a muffler in warm gray that matched his eyes. They spent the day together, cooking a feast and playing chess by the fire. It was the best Christmas Kendra had ever had. In January, word came through the Patterson brothers that Thomas Whitfield was telling everyone in Cheyenne that his wife had run off, and he was looking for a divorce. Vincent took Kendra to town to speak with the lawyer, who drew up papers and explained the process. It would take time, but it would happen. Thomas was making it easy by not contesting it. He probably wants to remarry, Kendra said on the ride back to the ranch. Find some other poor woman to torture. Maybe, Vincent said, but that's not your concern anymore. You're free of him, or you will be soon. The winter passed slowly but peacefully. Kendra and Vincent grew closer still, though they maintained propriety. They held hands sometimes when they sat together in the evenings. Vincent would kiss her forehead when he said goodnight. They spoke of the future in careful terms, making plans without quite saying what those plans meant. In March, the divorce papers came through. Kendra was officially no longer married to Thomas Whitfield. She was free. That evening, Vincent took her hands and said, Kendra Garrison, I know we've only known each other for 6 months, but they've been the best 6 months of my life. I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you make everything better just by being here. I love the way you laugh and the way you argue with me when you think I'm wrong. I love coming home to you every day. I want to do that for the rest of my life if you'll have me. Will you marry me? Kendra felt her heart swell until she thought it might burst. Yes, she said, her voice thick with tears. Yes, I'll marry you. Vincent pulled her into his arms and kissed her properly for the first time. It was gentle and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, both were smiling. Are you sure? Kendra asked. Really sure? Because I meant what I said. I can't give you children. And I meant what I said. I'll love you for you alone. We'll build a life together, Kendra. Maybe it won't look like everyone else's life, but it'll be ours, and that's what matters. They were married in April by the circuit preacher who came through Cheyenne. It was a simple ceremony with the Patterson brothers and their wives as witnesses. Kendra wore a dress she'd sewn herself from fabric Vincent had bought her, a soft green that brought out her eyes. Vincent wore his best suit and looked at her like she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Vincent kissed her tenderly, and Kendra felt something settle in her chest. This was right. This was home. Their wedding night was nervous and sweet. Vincent was patient, letting Kendra set the pace, showing her that intimacy could be gentle and loving rather than painful and demanding. He held her afterwards, stroking her hair and telling her he loved her, and Kendra finally understood what it meant to be truly cherished. Life as Vincent's wife was everything Kendra had dreamed marriage could be. They worked together, building their ranch into something thriving. Vincent expanded the herd and bought more land. Kendra's garden flourished, and she started selling her preserves in town for extra income. They talked about everything, laughed often, and built traditions that were theirs alone. There were hard days, of course. Days when the ranch work was brutal and money was tight. Days when Kendra would see a woman in town pregnant with child and feel that old ache of loss. Days when Vincent was injured by an ornery bull and Kendra feared losing him. But they faced everything together. One day in late summer, about a year after they'd married, Kendra was in town selling her preserves when she saw a young woman with two small children struggling to control them while trying to buy supplies. The woman looked exhausted and overwhelmed, dark circles under her eyes. "Can I help?" Kendra offered. The woman looked up gratefully. "Would you mind watching them for just a moment? I need to carry these supplies to the wagon and they keep trying to run off." "Of course." Kendra knelt down to the children's level, a boy of about 4 and a girl around 2. "Hello there, I'm Mrs. Bradley. What are your names?" The boy puffed out his chest. "I'm James and this is my sister Lily. Mama says we're a handful." "I can see that," Kendra said with a smile. "Do you like stories? I know a good one about a clever rabbit." The children settled down immediately as she wove a tale, and when their mother returned, she looked amazed. "How did you do that? They never sit still." "I just gave them something to focus on," Kendra said, ruffling the boy's hair. The woman introduced herself as Margaret Hayes. Her husband had died the previous winter, leaving her with the children and a failing farm. She was trying to manage everything alone and clearly drowning in the responsibility. Kendra felt a pull in her chest. "You need help." "I don't mean to pry, but if you need someone to watch the children sometimes or help with anything, my husband and I have a ranch about an hour from here. You'd be welcome to visit." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "I couldn't impose. It's not an imposition, truly." Over the following months, Margaret and her children became regular visitors to the Bradley Ranch. Kendra found herself looking forward to their visits, playing with James and Lily, teaching them things, watching them grow. Vincent took James under his wing, teaching the boy about horses and ranching. Little Lily attached herself to Kendra, following her everywhere and calling her Aunt Kendra. One evening, after Margaret and the children had left, Vincent found Kendra on the porch with tears on her cheeks. "What's wrong?" he asked, concerned. "Nothing's wrong," Kendra said. "I was just thinking about how much I love those children, how full my heart feels when they're here. And I was thinking that maybe I was wrong about what it means to be barren." Vincent sat beside her, waiting for her to continue. "I can't bear children," Kendra said slowly, "but that doesn't mean I can't mother them. Margaret is struggling so hard and those children need stability. What if we offered to take them in? Not permanently unless Margaret wants that, but to help her. We have space, we have resources, we have love to give." Vincent was quiet for a moment. "Are you sure? Taking in 2 young children would change everything." "I know, but I think it would change everything for the better. I've spent so long thinking about what I couldn't do that I forgot to think about what I could do. I can love these children. I can give them a good home. We can give them a good home if you're willing." "I'm willing," Vincent said softly. "I think it's a wonderful idea. We'll talk to Margaret." Margaret was initially reluctant, feeling like a burden, but when they explained that they genuinely wanted to help, that Kendra loved the children and they had room and resources, she finally agreed to let them come stay for a trial period. James and Lily moved into the ranch in October, and the house that had been peaceful became joyfully chaotic. There were toys scattered everywhere, constant questions, skinned knees to bandage, and lessons to teach. There were also hugs and laughter, small hands reaching for theirs, and the sweet sound of children calling them Aunt Kendra and Uncle Vincent. Margaret visited every week, and Kendra could see the relief in her eyes as she saw her children thriving. The woman was able to focus on saving her farm without the constant worry of childcare. She began to smile again, to stand straighter. One evening in December, Margaret sat with Vincent and Kendra after the children had gone to bed. "I need to talk to you about something," she said nervously. "What is it?" Kendra asked. "I've been offered a job in Denver. My brother runs a shop there and he needs help. He's offered me a position and a place to stay. It's a good opportunity, a fresh start." She twisted her hands together. "But it's no place for children. It's a small apartment above the shop in a rough part of town, and the hours would be long. I couldn't give James and Lily the kind of life they deserve." Kendra felt her heart start to pound. "I've watched you with my children this past year," Margaret continued, her eyes filling with tears. "I've seen how much you love them and how much they love you. They're happy here in a way they never were on the farm, even before their father died. You've given them stability and joy. And I know this is a huge thing to ask, but would you consider adopting them? Legally, permanently. I would visit whenever I could, but you would be their parents in every way that matters." Kendra couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. She looked at Vincent, who was looking at her with gentle understanding. "It's your choice," he said quietly. "Whatever you want, I'm with you." "Yes," Kendra whispered. "Oh yes, Margaret. We would be honored to raise your children. We'll love them like they're our own." "They will be your own," Margaret said, wiping her eyes. "In every way but blood. I love them enough to give them the life I can't provide. And I trust you to give them that life." The legal adoption took several months to finalize, but by spring, James and Lily were officially James Bradley and Lily Bradley. Vincent and Kendra stood before the judge with the children between them, and when he pronounced them a family, Kendra felt something break open inside her. This was what she'd been missing. This sense of completeness, of purpose, of love that expanded rather than diminished. James took to ranch life like he was born to it. He followed Vincent everywhere, learning about horses and cattle and the land. He had his father's earnest nature and a quick mind for figures. Vincent was endlessly patient with him, teaching and encouraging and showing him what it meant to be a good man. Lily was all sunshine and questions. She helped Kendra in the garden and the kitchen, chattering constantly, making up songs and stories. She had nightmares sometimes, memories of the hard times before, and Kendra would hold her through them, stroking her hair and promising her she was safe. She was loved. She was home. Margaret visited every few months. The children were always excited to see her, but when she left, they no longer cried. They waved goodbye and then turned to Vincent and Kendra, asking what they were going to do next. They had settled into their new life with the resilience of the young. Years passed, measured in small moments and large triumphs. James grew tall and serious, becoming Vincent's right hand on the ranch. He learned to break horses and mend fences and manage the books. When he was 16, he started courting a girl from town, and Vincent taught him how to treat a woman with respect and honor. Lily grew into a spirited young woman with her mother's beauty and Kendra's practical nature. She had a gift for healing, nursing injured animals back to health and helping neighbors when they were sick. When she was 15, she announced she wanted to become a nurse, and Vincent and Kendra supported her dream wholeheartedly. The ranch prospered under Vincent's careful management. He bought more land, built a better house, expanded the herd. But he never forgot what was truly important. Every evening, no matter how busy he was, he made time to sit with Kendra and talk about their day. Every Sunday, the family went to church together and then had a big dinner, often with neighbors and friends joining them. Kendra looked back on her life sometimes and marveled at how everything had changed. She thought about the terrified young woman who had fled into the night with nothing but hope and desperation. She thought about how close she had come to dying in the prairie sun, how close she had come to giving up. And then she looked at Vincent, gray now at the temples but still strong and steady. She looked at James and Lily, no longer children but not quite adults, finding their way in the world with confidence because they knew they were loved. She looked at the home they'd built, filled with warmth and laughter and life. She had been told she was barren, worthless, a failure. But Vincent had seen the truth. He had loved her for herself alone, and in doing so had shown her that family wasn't just about blood. It was about choice and commitment, and the daily decision to show up for each other. One evening, when James was 20 and Lily was 18, both grown and preparing to leave the ranch to pursue their own dreams, the family sat together on the porch watching the sunset. It had become their tradition over the years, this quiet time together at the end of the day. "I've been thinking," James said suddenly, "about how lucky Lily and I are." "Lucky how?" Vincent asked. "To have been chosen." "Mama Hayes loved us enough to give us to you, and you loved us enough to take us in. Not everyone gets parents who choose them specifically, who see them and want them." He looked at Vincent and Kendra with emotion clear in his eyes. "You didn't have to take in 2 kids who weren't yours. But you did, and you gave us everything. You taught us how to be good people. You showed us what love looks like. We're lucky to be Bradleys." Kendra felt tears spill down her cheeks. "We're the lucky ones. You two gave us purpose and joy. You made our house a home. You taught us that family is bigger than we ever imagined." "I used to think I was cursed," Kendra continued, looking at Vincent. "I thought being unable to bear children meant I was somehow less than, but I was wrong. God didn't curse me. He just had a different plan. He brought me James and Lily, and I love them just as fiercely as if I'd carried them myself. Maybe more, because I chose them with my eyes wide open." Lily moved to sit beside Kendra, resting her head on her shoulder. "You're the best mother anyone could ask for. You saved us. Both of you did." Vincent reached over and took Kendra's hand, squeezing gently. "We saved each other," he said. "All 4 of us. That's what families do." They sat together as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. 4 people bound not by blood, but by something stronger. Choice, commitment, and a love that had weathered every storm. That night, after the children had gone to bed, Vincent and Kendra lay in their room, talking quietly in the darkness as they had done for 18 years. "Do you have any regrets?" Kendra asked. "Not a single one," Vincent said immediately. "Do you?" "No. I used to think happiness was a house and a husband and children born from my body. I thought there was only one way for life to turn out right. But I was wrong. This life we've built, it's better than anything I imagined. We made our own path." "We did," Vincent agreed. He pulled her closer. "I remember what I told you that first time you warned me you were barren. I said I'd love you for you alone. I meant it then and I mean it now. You are enough, Kendra. You've always been enough." "I know," Kendra said, and she meant it. She had finally learned her own worth, learned that her value wasn't measured in her ability to reproduce, but in her capacity to love, to nurture, to create a home from nothing but determination and hope. In the years that followed, James married his childhood sweetheart and brought her to live at the ranch. He took over more and more of the operations as Vincent's body began to feel the years of hard work. James and his wife had 3 children, and Vincent and Kendra became beloved grandparents, continuing the cycle of love and chosen family. Lily went to nursing school in Denver and fell in love with a kind doctor. They married and stayed in the city, but Lily visited often, bringing her husband and eventually their 2 daughters to spend summers at the ranch. Vincent and Kendra grew old together, watching their family expand and thrive. They celebrated anniversaries and birthdays, weathered illnesses and losses, and held tight to each other through it all. When Vincent was 65 and Kendra 62, they sat on the porch one evening, their hands clasped together, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. James was teaching the oldest boy to rope a fence post, his patience echoing Vincent's teaching from years ago. Lily's daughters were helping in the garden, their laughter bright in the evening air. "We did good," Vincent said softly. "We did," Kendra agreed. "We built something beautiful." "I love you," Vincent said, turning to look at her. His gray eyes were still as clear and steady as they'd been the first day they met. "I've loved you for 33 years, and I'll love you until my last breath." "And I love you," Kendra said. "You saved my life, Vincent Bradley. And then you taught me how to live it." He kissed her gently, the kiss of 2 people who knew every line and curve of each other, who had weathered every storm together, who had chosen each other again and again, day after day, year after year. As the sun set over the Wyoming plains, painting the world in hues of gold and purple, Kendra reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had run into the night with nothing but fear and hope. She had stumbled through the prairie sun, certain she would die alone. And then Vincent had found her, and everything had changed. He had seen her not as broken or deficient, but as whole and valuable exactly as she was. He had loved her for herself alone, and in doing so, had shown her the truth. That love wasn't about meeting expectations or fulfilling roles. It was about seeing another person clearly and choosing them anyway. It was about building something together, day by day, moment by moment. She had thought she was barren, empty, unable to create life. But she had created something more lasting than children born from her body. She had created a home filled with love. She had created a family bound by choice rather than obligation. She had created a legacy that would ripple forward through generations, showing each person touched by it that they were worthy of love, that they were enough. That family was what you made it. Vincent squeezed her hand, and she turned to smile at him. In his eyes, she saw her whole story reflected back. The scared girl who had run into the night, the woman who had learned to hope again, the wife and mother and grandmother who had built a life beyond her wildest dreams. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what? For seeing me, for loving me, for giving me this life." "Thank you for letting me," Vincent replied. "For trusting me, for choosing me back, for making every day an adventure." They sat together in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear overhead, the same stars that had wheeled above them that first night when Vincent had found her lost and desperate in the prairie. But everything else had changed. Kendra was no longer lost. She was exactly where she belonged. The grandchildren eventually tired themselves out and came running to the porch for hugs and kisses before bed. James and his wife gathered their brood, calling good nights as they headed to their house on the other side of the ranch. Lily and her husband settled the girls in the guest room, then came to say good night. "Thanks for having us, Dad," Lily said, kissing Vincent's cheek. To Kendra, she said, "I love you, Mama." "I love you too, sweetheart," Kendra said, holding her daughter close for a moment. When everyone had settled for the night, Vincent and Kendra made their way to their bedroom, their steps slower than they once were, but still in sync. They prepared for bed with the ease of long practice, and when they lay down together, Vincent wrapped his arms around Kendra just as he had done for 33 years. "You remember that day I found you?" Vincent asked quietly. "You looked so fierce, even though you were about to collapse. You looked at me like you were ready to fight if you had to, even though you could barely stand." "I remember," Kendra said. "I thought you might be another threat. I was so tired of being afraid. And now I'm not afraid of anything as long as you're beside me." They fell asleep like that, wrapped together, two souls who had found each other against all odds and built something extraordinary from nothing but love and determination. The years continued to pass, measured in seasons and celebrations. Vincent eventually handed the ranch over to James completely, though he still helped where he could. He and Kendra spent their time with their grandchildren, with their friends, with each other. They took trips to see Lily in Denver. They attended church socials and town gatherings. They lived quietly but fully, savoring each ordinary moment. When Vincent was 73, he suffered a heart attack while helping James fix a fence. He survived, but it weakened him, and both he and Kendra knew their time was growing short. But they didn't waste energy on fear or regret. Instead, they focused on gratitude, on appreciating each day they had together. "I don't want you to be alone," Vincent said one evening as they sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets against the autumn chill. "I won't be alone," Kendra assured him. "I have James and Lily, I have the grandchildren. I have a whole life full of people who love me because you taught me I was worth loving." "Promise me you'll be happy," Vincent said. "After I'm gone, promise me you'll keep living, keep laughing." "I promise," Kendra said, though her voice shook. "But you have to promise me something too." "Anything? Promise me you know how grateful I am, that you changed everything for me, that loving you was the greatest privilege of my life." "I know," Vincent said softly, "and loving you was mine." Vincent passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 weeks later with Kendra holding his hand. He was 73 years old. They had been married for 42 years. The funeral was well attended. Vincent had been respected throughout the territory for his integrity and kindness. People came from miles around to pay their respects, to share stories of how he had helped them over the years. James delivered a eulogy that spoke of his father's strength and gentleness, his unwavering principles, his capacity for love. Lily spoke of how lucky she and James had been to be chosen by him, to be shown what a good man looked like. Kendra sat in the front row, surrounded by her family, grieving but not broken. Vincent had loved her for herself alone, and in doing so, had given her the strength to stand on her own. She would miss him every day for the rest of her life, but she would not fall apart. She would honor his memory by living fully, by continuing to love their family, by being the woman he had seen in her from the very beginning. In the years after Vincent's death, Kendra remained active and engaged. She helped James and his wife with the ranch. She visited Lily in Denver. She doted on her grandchildren and, eventually, her great-grandchildren. She told stories of Vincent, keeping his memory alive for the younger generations. She made sure they knew the story of how their family began, how a cowboy had found a desperate woman in the prairie sun and loved her for herself alone. She lived to be 91 years old, sharp-minded and strong-willed until the very end. When she passed away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by her family, she left behind a legacy of love that spanned 4 generations. At her funeral, James, now an old man himself, spoke of his mother's courage and resilience. Lily talked about her mother's capacity for love, how she had taken in 2 broken children and shown them what family meant. The grandchildren shared memories of her wisdom and humor. The great-grandchildren spoke of her kindness. They buried her next to Vincent, under the Wyoming sky they had both loved. The headstone reads simply, "Kendra Bradley, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother, she taught us that family is what we make it." The ranch continued through the generations, passed from James to his children, and eventually to their children. Each generation was told the story of how it all began, how Vincent had found Kendra when both needed saving, how they had built a life together despite everyone's expectations, how they had proven that love was about choice and commitment rather than biology. And in each generation, someone would inevitably ask about the words inscribed on the small plaque that hung in the ranch house, words that had been passed down and treasured. She warned him she was barren. The cowboy said, "Then I'll love you for you alone." And they would tell the story again, of Vincent and Kendra, of 2 souls who found each other against all odds and proved that the strongest families are built not on blood alone, but on love chosen freely and given without condition. They would speak of the courage it took to love in the face of society's expectations, of the strength required to build a life different from what everyone said was right. The story became part of the family's foundation, a reminder that they came from people who had faced impossible odds and created something beautiful. It taught each new generation that worth wasn't determined by what you could produce or provide, but by who you were and how you loved. Vincent and Kendra's story became legend in that part of Wyoming, told and retold until the details blurred but the essential truth remained. That real love sees past limitations to the whole person beneath. That family is made through choice and commitment, and that sometimes the greatest blessings come from unexpected places. Their legacy lived on not just in the descendants who bore their name, but in the values they had instilled, the love they had shown, and the example they had set of what marriage and family could be when built on respect, equality, and genuine partnership. And somewhere under the vast Wyoming sky, in the land they had loved and worked, their story continued to inspire, a testament to the truth that the heart knows no limits, that love is not defined by what we can produce, but by what we give freely, and that the strongest bonds are those we choose to forge ourselves. The Bradley Ranch still stands today, a working ranch passed through generations, each one adding their own chapter to the family story. But it all began with a terrified woman stumbling through the prairie sun and a cowboy who saw past her fear to the strength beneath. It began with words spoken in truth and accepted in grace. "Then I'll love you for you alone." And from that moment, everything changed. 2 people who had been told they were less than, who had been limited by the expectations of others, found freedom in choosing each other. They built a family not in spite of their circumstances, but because of the strength those circumstances had forged in them. They proved that the deepest love isn't about fulfilling roles or meeting expectations, but about seeing another person truly and choosing to walk beside them, come what may. That was the gift Vincent gave Kendra and the gift she gave him in return, the freedom to be fully themselves, fully seen, fully loved. And that gift rippled forward through time, touching everyone who came after them, showing each person that they too were enough, exactly as they were. This is the story the family still tells, sitting on that same porch, looking out at those same stars. This is the foundation upon which generations have built their lives. And this is the truth they carry forward. That love, real love, sees past the surface to the soul and says without reservation, "You are enough. You have always been enough, and I will love you for you alone now and always."